You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So we were actually talking earlier about the whole Thrawn thing. I remember off camera. We've been talking about this for quite some time, actually, about Thrawn's upcoming appearance in Ahsoka and everything. And you actually are the one that ran across this really, really interesting article about how Lars Mikkelsen, who was confirmed, by the way, to actually be playing the live-action Thrawn, has decided against rewatching his performance in Rebels in order to get back into the character or whatever, which I thought was a pretty interesting thing. And, of course, we could go into why. This comes from an article from thedirect.com, and we'll read little excerpts from it or whatever. But overall, what was your initial reaction when you heard that he was just like, you know what? I'm not going to rewatch anything about Thrawn.
I'm mixed emotions, honestly. I mean, I on one hand, I'm kind of wondering why. I mean, of course, he does eventually explain why, which is he just kind of wants to bring something different to the character. But my thing is, like, we are the character as he portrayed him. So if his changes that he's making to his portrayal of Thrawn going to be better or worse than what so far within. I mean, fortunately, he was a voice, but now he's in live action. So the physical element of Thrawn, and really Thrawn, it's his delivery, it's his mind. I just hope he keeps the timbre of his voice. I hope he keeps that pace of delivery that was kind of almost like a Ben Stein, like dry eyes. Like he kind of quiet but eerie delivery in a way. So I hope he keeps that.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, if you see Daryl's image freezing and unfreezing or any stuttering, it's just bad internet connection today. That's all. Yeah, I agree. Actually, I think that honestly, it is important that he keeps the basic character of Thrawn intact. It's important that he doesn't try to go too far off the scope. Now, basically like directly just from this article, they asked him, did you ever go back and watch old Rebel episodes? Because Rebels was where Thrawn made his in-canon debut as far as from being pulled from the expanded universe. And of course, they changed a few things here and there. But he said, no, I didn't really. We needed to do something else, so I wanted to detach myself from that to create something new. And at first when I read that, like you, I was a little bit like, try something new. But Thrawn's a pretty well-established character. And in fact, he's actually had multiple novels written in canon now that further establish, or I should say reestablish his role. So, I mean, it's a little dangerous, I think, depending on the situation. Now, the next section, he says there's certain things that you can do with the cartoon that you can't do in live action. He's like, you need to adapt to it being live action. There's certain things that you can do in the cartoon that you can't. So, I mean, from that standpoint, I understand. He says in terms of the embodiment of the character itself, I feel like I had practice, for 5 or 6 years, because even when we're voicing in a box, we're still sort of doing it, still making the moves in that box and doing that thing. I mean, I felt I had practice. So it does sound like he's going to keep a lot of the mannerisms. It sounds like it's really more of a question of the live action versus animation. There's certain things that in the animation that you can do or are done that you can't necessarily do live action, so you have to translate that.
Yeah, one of the things I've often loved is watching the behind the scenes of like voices doing like Disney movies, or like some of my favorite animated series, like Batman, watching Mark Hamill do the Joker, or
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Conroy doing Batman, and Tim Daly doing Superman, and just um actors, voice actors, really do kind of doing their thing, and that's one thing that I didn't really account for, but they are literally acting back there. Like, they're
Right.
sometimes they get really into character, like where they're throwing like make believe things in the air just to get that emotion into the voice of the character. So I'm really curious to see um different mannerisms. Like, we always saw Thrawn on Rebels. Like, he has this thing where he talks with both hands behind his back, and he kind of has that very cool general look, that
Right.
very straight up, chest out, head high, hands behind the back like man. And that's kind of part of his command. So I wondering that um to Ahsoka as well. But yeah, that part at least is somewhat comforting, as far as him keeping the temper of the voice and the mannerisms of Thrawn, because I think that's very important. But you know, just the sinister looks, like with like in the animation, a lot of times he will have some very sinister look. Um, um, what is it called? Like a smoldering glare, if you will.
Yeah.
He would kind of do things like that. So I'm really interested to see what he's going to bring to this Thrawn.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. They said, was it a shock to look at yourself in the mirror the first day in the makeup and just go, And of course, Mikkelsen said it was. Oh, yeah. I mean, they're so phenomenally good, the people that are working at that. And it takes a better part of 3 hours to do that transition, which I was
Hmm.
really happy about, because what that means is that they're not just putting blue face paint and hand paint on them. They're probably going to
Hmm.
make him look very similar to the way that he looks here, and I think that that's one of those things that you have to do, because part of Thrawn's whole thing, and I think people forget this sometimes, he is technically an alien. I mean, he's a Chiss.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
as obvious as that may be, especially to longtime Thrawn fans, I think a lot of people forget that even though he looks a little bit different or whatever, he's still, because he blends so well in with the rest of the Empire, obviously, except for his appearance, people, I think, forget that he's part of this alien race from, basically the unknown regions. And you need to really, I think, embody that within the character and within the look of the character. You have to basically not cheese out on the actual look and doing the whole makeup and all that stuff. So I was actually really happy to see that, yeah, you know, he's taking care of business that way.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing too, I love hearing when these actors are like getting into costume or wardrobe and makeup and things like that, because it makes it more real for them. Um, you
Hmm.
hear a lot of actors, like I said, especially when you're playing in the superhero kind of world, um, when they put on these costumes or the makeup, like for example, when Heath Ledger did the Joker, when you had uh, I believe it was Michael Keaton, just when he put on the Batman, costume, it's just kind of like, okay, now you have to bring that darkness. Like, you're the character now. Now you have things that you can use to emote that. You have this mask that you can kind of hide behind and get into a character. So with him being in the makeup, he he's already has the great voice for it. And so now that he has, the I wonder, to see how they're gonna do those red eyes of his. Like, are they gonna be contacts, or
Yeah,
are
because
they gonna be like a CG things, or because it's like the whole eye. It's not just like the eyeball. I mean, it's like the whole thing.
yeah, and
The
a
whole
lot of
eye is red.
times, every actor that has worn, the complete eye covering contacts always talks about how it's extremely painful, and You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
you can only do it for
Uncomfortable.
like 10
Yeah.
minutes at a time or something stupid. So yeah, I mean, unless they made him more comfortable, I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, what
So
did they
yeah,
do
that's
for what's her face? Mystique. Cuz I think
oh yeah. Yeah.
those were like full eye covering contacts, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's been a handful. I don't know if they've improved the technology or not, but yeah, it would be interesting cuz I mean, when you look at this dude, I mean, he's, you know, yeah, this isn't like, you know, you're just
Yeah, Thrawn is very he's an imposing figure. That's the thing, we've talked about this on the show, like when we covered David Prowse and just, being in the Vader costume, just being able to um have Vader's gait, like the way Vader walks. The same thing when we talked about Peter Mayhew, Eunice replaced Peter Mayhew as Chewbacca, and he had to get the walking and everything kind of right just so it can be cohesive with the portrayal of Peter Mayhew. So all these different things are really vital into like bringing a character to life, especially someone that's beloved as Thrawn. I mean, I remember when we went to go see the midnight movie, the midnight marathon of all the Star Wars movies. Remember that one guy, he was dressed as Thrawn. He
yeah.
kind of, I was like,
Yeah,
he
that
had the
was a
white, thing with
that
that.
was
I was
that
like,
was good.
wow.
I know, and that was the
Yeah,
first time where you're kind of like, "Ooh, I kind of want to see this in live action now."
exactly. Like, man. So then my trailer for Ahsoka, we got him, and it's just kind of like, all right, he's kind of walking in, everybody's kind of like at attention, and Thrawn has this grace about him where he's very, very, very confident. And the thing about him, he doesn't have the Force, but he's a very, formidable hand to hand combat fighter.
Mm-hmm.
But his thing is his mind. Like his mind is he's playing chess moves with people, and he's usually like 5 to 7 steps ahead of most people. So even in Rebels, we would see like moments where we think like, oh, our heroes got the best of Thrawn, and it seems that way. But then Thrawn is always like, oh, I anticipated this.
Yep.
It doesn't make me any difference because in my plan is, and you're just like, how? It's almost like Palpatine, like man, like and you gotta almost kind of wonder like who's a better strategist. That might be a cool show one day too. Better strategist, Thrawn or Palpatine. But once we see of it, we might be able to make that
Well, and the thing is that yeah,
distinction.
I mean, there's been different, I guess, elements in there as far as in the novels and the comics where that question is almost posed. I mean, actually in universe, so. That
Mm,
part's really interesting. But here's the thing where this discussion can also lead, because it almost begs a bigger question. Is it actually better, especially if you're moving forward with something or whatever, if you're dealing with an established character, is it better to not actually view or whatever the source material that's there? So in other words, say you're a woman that's called to play Mara Jade, right? And they
hmm
decide to bring her in. Is it a good idea, maybe beyond some of the very basics, because you want to get a feel of who the character is, but
Sure.
particularly people that have not been portrayed in live action. But the question can certainly be even for those who have, like say Harrison Ford, maybe going back and watching episodes 4, 5, and 6 to sort of get the Han Solo thing back. He obviously didn't have to do that because he can embody their character easily, it turns out. But the question is a good one. Is it really beneficial or is it detrimental for an actor to go back and view source material or maybe to rewatch something?
I think it all depends on the character that you're playing, and then so like if you have a character that has a defined disposition, then yes, I think you do need to, especially if they already have a following. Because, and I often use this as an example. So, if you have someone like um Beetle, the Joker. All right. Now there's a bunch of different we've seen different actors portray the Joker, and they portrayed him in different ways, and that's fine because the Joker is a very multi where he has different sides to his personality because he's crazy. It stands to reason that he kind of has these differences to him. But if you're playing someone like um a James Bond, yes, like Daniel Craig has played him a little different, a little bit, a little rougher than maybe let's say a Roger Moore, but Sean Connery certainly played James Bond a little rougher. So,
Yeah,
but
but
there's
here's
still that thread of okay, you still have to be convincing. You're a polished guy. You're smooth with women. You see what I'm saying? Like there's a there's beats in there that you have to have, and you can work within that framework, so to speak. But there's clearly defined attributes to a person where it's like, okay, in order to be believable, you have to have these qualities.
well, and I'll say this. There's a lot of different situations that you can bring up here. First of all, you brought up the Joker. The Joker is somebody who has been established not just in comics, but then also different actors portraying them. And you could say the same thing even about James Bond, where you have
Mhm.
a well established character where a bunch of different people have played them. And so you have a choice. Like, say, in the case of James Bond, you could do one of two things. You can either maybe draw your performance from one of the previous actors, or maybe like a combination,
Mhm.
or you can actually go right back to the source material, to the Ian Fleming novels, and glean the character from there, just going right back to the source.
Mhm.
You can almost do
Right.
the same thing with the Joker, too. But in the case of, say, when Michael Keaton reprised his role as Batman for the Flash movie,
Mhm.
okay, this is, even though there have been other Batmans, he's one of the few characters who years later actually reprised his role. And so it's kind of like, okay, do I basically rewatch my Batman movies to get back into that headspace? Do I go for some of the more modern portrayals? Do I, maybe go to some of the comics, whether they be classic or,
Mhm.
modern? There's stuff like that. And then in the case of somebody like Thrawn, you have a situation where the character has been brought about, in particular by this actor, into animation, but you might as well just say he's like a new character because it's not like he's been around. I mean, he has, but he's existed mostly in books and things like that. And then the closest example that you can come with that might be when, say, Roy Scheider was trying to portray Chief Brody in Jaws. It's like, well, Spielberg, on one hand, has a way that he wants me to play this character, but is it beneficial for me to read the Peter Benchley novel and find out, okay, what is this character all about? And should I use that, I guess, in my own portrayal of it? And
Mhm.
that's where the question becomes. It's like, yeah, you can go back and look at all these other actors or whatever, but there is also the source material. And in pretty much the best example I can give is that if somebody has never been portrayed before, there's always that.
Yeah, it's never been portrayed like in the sense of Thrawn. Then and for Mickelson, like I think you know, well, it's like if you and I'll use your Michael Keaton example because he's the man, but it's from his time period. So
Mhm.
it wouldn't make sense for him to be a or or some other person, um, because he's being called to be 1989. You know what I mean?
Right.
I
Yeah,
think
that's true. That is an exception.
so. For that, I would say, um, and for me, I mean, and I'm not an actor, but for someone to have he set the bar. Let's just call it what it is. He kind of set the measuring stick of playing back. So to me, it doesn't seem like it would take an actor like you just like okay, you kind of remember like okay, I remember playing Batman. I remember what that was like because people ask him all the time. Oh yeah, I remember when Batman, and even though that's been like 30 years ago, it's still one of those characters that like I'm sure he gets asked about a lot and he still probably has a lot of memories of. So I don't think it would take him someone like him long to or it would be hard for them to get back into it. To your point of doing something like that's never been done before. And I would definitely say I go to the source material to understand this character so I can and then talk to the director, figure out how they want me to play this character because
Exactly.
um
That's it right
now
there.
yeah, I think I need to understand this character's motivation. We've all seen like for example, the different Spider-Man, you had Tobey Maguire, had Andrew Garfield, and you've now have what's his face now? Tom Holland, right? So like to me, Tom Holland Tom Holland and Tobey kind of has Spider-Man opinion. But man, but I get Andrew Garfield playing a different version of Spider-Man, so that's and even discount that. So it's a lot of different nuances that go into it. But I think, like you said, if you're playing a character that has never been played before, it's necessary for you to at least gain a lot of source material on that character, so you know how, especially if it's a character, to know really get into it, and how that is what station, how they should trade, things of that nature. But or however, I think you need to also look at the director and say like, okay, this is what I'm getting. Is this how you want me to play him, or do you? This is what I'm thinking of this character. So like almost like an Ahsoka, you know, um,
Yeah, that's another really good example actually.
like
Is
Rosario
Ahsoka.
Dawson, you know, you know, because it is different because it's like if Ashley Eckstein actually played the live Ahsoka, all right, it's because she's been playing her for so long, she knows that character. But Rosario Dawson never, she wasn't a part of that,
Mhm.
but she definitely consulted with Ashley. It's like, hey, what did you do to get into this to the character? Because so I can figure out what an older version of that be. And so there, like I said, those are the nuances because you're not just playing Ahsoka, you're playing an older version of her. So what did Ahsoka go to get to the point where she is now, where she's a little bit more wiser, seasoned, she's a little bit more calm. She's not as reckless as she was in season 3 of Wars. You know what I mean?
Well,
So
even Ashley herself had to do that because in Rebels, you got to
mhm,
remember Ahsoka in Rebels is not that much younger than Ahsoka in The Mandalorian. So Ashley went through that struggle where it was like, okay, I had to come back to this character, and I'm like, I have to figure out basically like you said. And that's a really good example too, because where Lars Mikkelsen is right now is where Ashley Eckstein would be if she were the one playing the live action Ahsoka. And so, yeah, from that standpoint, it's a little different though, because Ahsoka came from the mind of Filoni, and
mhm,
Ashley was the one that brought that character to life. Thrawn, on the other hand, is a book character, and he's somebody that's had like this, 30-year history, at least 25
mhm.
years before he was even brought into anything. So there is, I think, that's from that standpoint, you have to look at it like, okay, I agree. You have to respect the source material because you could wind up in a situation like Tom Cruise was with the Jack Reacher character, or even to a degree, Jason Statham is with the Jonas Taylor character from The Meg, because if you read the source material, these characters are very, very different from how they're portrayed in film.
Mm. Yeah.
Now, that's intentional on the part of the director, but the problem is that if you don't, as an actor, find a way to maybe gain
Bridge the
some
gap.
knowledge, of the character as is written, and maybe somehow portray that or convey that in your own performance, irrespective of what the director is trying to do. Obviously, you have to do that too. But
Hmm.
I think that people can always tell if there's a sensitivity to the actual character. You know, it's like if you're portraying a character from a novel or something that's existed for a while, even if they're trying to do something a little bit different, bringing it to a live action film, people can always tell if you have read or studied or, whatever, the original source material. And I think that that's really where it's beneficial. Again, you may not use any of it. You know, you may read it, but the fact that it's in you now and the fact that you have studied it, you've gone through it, yes, I think that that translates on the screen, even if you're portraying it in a completely different way from whatever the source material may be.
Yeah, I mean, I think um I was sitting here thinking like, man, all right, so it's been years since he's played Luke Skywalker. And so
Yeah,
when we bring him back in, The Last Jedi, he was kind of upset more or less because he was like,
right.
Ryan Johnson had him in a Luke Skywalker that he did like, okay, this is not the character that I essentially like. You're talking. I mean, yes, George Lucas created Luke Skywalker, the character, but Mark Hamill is who really brought him to life,
Right.
made him what he is. And
Embodied
so
the
then now
character
you're
and
trying,
so on.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So now you're trying to tell me this is not how I want you to play Luke. This is the Luke Skywalker we are now, and it's like that doesn't seem like something Luke would do. You know what I mean? Like it's no different than like when Harrison Ford said like, okay, no, Han wouldn't say I love you too. He would just say I know, and that's why we got that is because I mean, Harrison really who Han Solo was as a character, and when Mark Hamill had to go back and play Luke Skywalker again, you know, he was tweeting out like, yeah, I'm like, I don't know about like this.
Yeah, it's just it's one of those things where exactly. I mean, as an actor, especially if it's a character you played multiple times, not like a one and done thing,
Yeah,
you definitely
yeah,
get more of a sense because now that character is in you. That character is a part of you now. And
and not only
there
okay.
is, well, I'm just saying, there is that. It got me thinking. I mean, when you brought that
Mhm.
up, because there is a part of that that nobody else but the actor shares. You know, it's kind of like they're a part of
That's
you.
right.
They're embodying this character in a way that the director, the producer, or even the writer hasn't.
Mhm. We deal with that though. With that point, the thing that makes Mark Hamill situation very different is that he progression with Luke. So he played him as the hey, what's that flashing? He that
Yeah,
annoying, almost kid like to the point where you get into the Return of the Jedi where he's walking into the you know Jabba's palace helping people, and he has that very calm demeanor. He's not afraid when he's talking to Jabba. Even when he's talking, it's like, you'll die, and I'll die with me. That type of boldness, that type of gravitas that Luke Skywalker is, you see him from A New Hope to Return of the Jedi. So Mark Hamill's actually developed Luke over a course of movies. All right. So then now you're trying to show him in another phase of his development, and it doesn't coincide with what he already built. So,
Yeah.
I can understand that.
Well, and I think the only thing that maybe protected it, and it's why Hamill didn't just walk off the set, is because you can you could accept the fact that, all right, 30 years is a long time. I mean, things could have happened or whatever that would make Luke do what he did, but it's not really
Mhm.
the Luke from the trajectory. I think it made it even worse that you had the expanded universe that more or less gave us the Luke that we wanted over the years. I mean,
Yeah, that too.
there is a,
And
a,
he
a terrible comparison there, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, and he also knew what the fans wanted too, and that's another thing
Right.
because he's always stayed connected. He's always at celebration. He's always, responding to tweets and stuff like that. He's on talk shows, so he's only engaging people with the character Skywalker, and so I think that that point where you want me to play him this way, not only do I not like it, but I know the fans aren't going to like it either because I know what they want from me. I know what they're expecting.
Yep.
And so I think that's why when we got the main episode, when it's like that's why everybody went like nuts because it's like, yes,
Exactly.
this is the Luke we wanted to see. It's like that was almost like a my bad, we're sorry, we're gonna fix this for you. We're gonna give you another moment, the one that you wanted with him and Nighting the Green and being like all powerful Luke Skywalker again. You know, that's what people really wanted to see. And a lot of them feel kind of gypped from that in that movie. So but that's one of those things where like certain people don't have to go back and look at their character because they know that their character well, but it's a character that you kind of like, I didn't care nothing about. Like I could see if um uh goodness, if Alec had to go back and play Obi-Wan, I could see him having to try to remember how he played him because he didn't want to play him. You know what I mean?
Right.
It wasn't his thing, you know what I'm saying? Like, you got somebody, where you have I think right now, uh, our Obi-Wan,
Oh, Ewan McGregor?
Ewan McGregor. Thank you, McGregor. Like, he's been chomping at the bit to play Obi-Wan.
Sure.
Easy for him to get to it. So,
Well, it's kind of
so
like you
there's
said, though, because that's the difference. A lot of these guys in the beginning, right, like your Alec Guinnesses and stuff, they're reading this going, this is like the stupidest thing I've ever read. And, I mean, whereas somebody like Ewan McGregor, now, sure, his uncle was Wedge. So,
Mhm.
I mean, but at the same time, um, you also have somebody that grew up with it and had that love for it
Mhm.
because of the effect that it had on him. Somebody like Alec Guinness, it was just a job, and that's the primary difference. And that's also something that you're going to take with you if you come back to the character, if it's I mean, look,
Mhm.
I will give Harrison Ford all the credit in the world because he was so
Right.
only going back to that role for the paycheck and because he was asked to do it, right? He didn't want to, he didn't care, but yet,
And the fact they were going to kill him off.
and the fact they were going to kill him off. But you never get that sense during the viewing of the film. He's
No,
just
not at
as
all.
present in the character as he
Yep.
was in the beginning. And
Mhm.
that's a professional right there. That's somebody where because you can tell when people are either phoning
Oh.
it in or they just don't want to be there, you know.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, I mean, Alec Guinness was the same way because he
Mhm.
hated the fact that he had to return for the other two. He thought it was just going to be this one and done thing and he would never have to worry about it again. He was horrified when it became a hit. Not
Yeah, he's like,
monetarily, of
son
course,
of a
because he was smart enough
yeah.
to get a percentage of the gross. I mean, so that set him up forever. But he would never know, based on his performance in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, that he wasn't 100% into it. And that's something that's cool too, is that if you can embody the character to a point to where even if you don't want to be there, you can still deliver a convincing performance. And I think that that's something that is overlooked by a lot of people in rating some of this stuff. And that's why I say, you know, it's sort of bringing it back full circle in a way, but Lars Mikkelsen is one of the, I guess, more unique situations because he actually began this journey in animation and he gets to continue it in live action.
Yeah.
And that's somewhat of a rarity anyway.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, so it just,
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does. I mean, I will admit that, okay, perhaps we need a little bit of a different thing from Thrawn during this time period, but let's not forget that this time period is the time period in which Thrawn originally existed. I mean, when he was in the novels, it was post Return of the Jedi. It's pretty much it. So I'm really looking... Yeah, exactly. You know, really, they were shoehorning him into Rebels because he wasn't originally written during that time period, so they had to figure out how to make that work. Which, of course, Timothy Zahn he actually wrote a Thrawn trilogy for the new canon that sort of explained all that. And then, I still haven't finished reading it all yet. I still got to read books 2 and 3 of Thrawn Ascendancy, which really is more like a prequel. It takes place in, you know, the whole Chiss homeworlds and all that other stuff. But point is, they have taken Thrawn fully from the expanded universe and given him a background in the current canon that we have, which is good.
Yeah. I'm really interested in seeing what Lars brings to the screen. I think it's going to be cool, though. I think it's really going to be.
I do too.
Really cool. I just hope that he just basically essentially keeps the essence of Thrawn. I think he'll be all right, and he's already got it. We know he can do it because we've seen it, you know, at least or heard it vocally, you know. So just seeing his mannerisms, see if he can, and that's the thing is like how I think the part that I want to see is not so much on how he portrayed him vocally, but just what the animation did with him, and how they I think that because that also gives him some new on how to emote and move like Thrawn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I'll piggyback that sentiment. I mean, I think that he's already pretty much there, right? With the voicing and just, you can tell even because you do emote while you're speaking. So you can tell he's probably acting all this stuff out in the vocal booth. But I actually, I like you, have high hopes. It's going to be interesting to see what he does differently with the role and where they go with it. But yeah, I think he's got it. I don't think we're going to be disappointed. And I think in a lot of ways, it might be good for him not to rewatch Rebels in order to maybe get a fresh take on the character. I mean, I would rather he go and read some of the new canon books that feature Thrawn at this point.
Maybe he will.
Maybe he will.
Maybe.
So it's gonna be interesting to watch, and we're not gonna have to wait that long. I mean, doesn't it premiere like August?
It's like right around your birthday, I think.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it was
15th or something like that.
Something like that. I don't know why, like August 4th sticks in my mind, but you're right. I think it was closer to my birthday, so I think it's like maybe it was the 14th or something like that. I don't know, but we don't have long to wait. And of course, you know us, we're going to review each and every episode when they come out. So it'll be a nice change from Visions, right?
Absolutely.
It'd be like, yeah, cool. We get to review a series I actually like. That'd be fun. All right, but as always, as you guys could tell, you know, I didn't even mention this in the beginning of the show. We ended up having to pre-record this episode because we're not going to be able to do it live. But it is premiered, so you've been watching it since 8 o'clock tonight, so hopefully you guys have been chatting in and, commenting on what it is that we've been talking about this whole night. But if you haven't, you do have an opportunity, of course, to leave a comment in the comment section. Make sure that you give us a thumbs up, give us a like, because the YouTube algorithm just really likes. And then as a result, so do we. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because we love subscribers. Because after all, we just want to expand this community and talk Star Wars with even more people on Friday night and Monday night at 8 o'clock. So you're not going to want to miss it. We're going to, what episode are we on? 5 of Visions? I think we're on episode 5.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. I hope so.
I think it's 5.
I think it's 5.
Right.
So just watch us Monday night at 8. We're going to be continuing our review on Star Wars Visions, painful though it may be. At least I think so. You know what? We might have to pre-record that one too. Because in thinking about it, this job that I've got is out of town, and I don't know if I'll be back in time or not. So, we might have to do another pre-record. But either way, you guys will see us suffer through Visions. All right, so with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.